Well, hello and welcome one and all to this special program. It's the Parliamentary Agenda. And tonight, you know, usually once we've got this program, it really speaks to the sitting, which is going to come shortly after. And tomorrow, we are going to be having a sitting. And so this evening with me, I've got Minister of Governance and Parliamentary Affairs, Madam Gail Teixeira, and we will be speaking to quite a number of very pertinent matters, some that will be coming before the members of the House tomorrow.
Yes.
It's my pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you very much, and good evening to all your viewers. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you so much for coming. There are quite a number of matters that will be addressed tomorrow. Tomorrow, you did, speaking off camera, tomorrow's a day that the opposition will have a chance to have
Yes, Private Members' Day. Yeah.
Private Members' Day.
That's what it's called.
Let's, off the bat, get to some of the topics that you expect to be placed on the table tomorrow.
Well, I think they've known for a long time, because the budget ended on March the 4th, that the next day was theirs.
Yeah.
Because it's every fourth sitting. And so they've had a while to prepare themselves, I assume. And what we've ended up with are two motions from Mr. Patterson, one on flaring with the oil and gas industry, and the other one on the location of shore-based services. Mm-hmm. And so that's about it they have on the agenda. Nothing else. After all these, well, months in a sense, March, April, May, to be able to, that's all they have on the agenda. And so we have matters on the agenda, and of course, because it's Private Members' Day, they take precedence. Mm-hmm. And so we have, as you'll notice tomorrow, we have 7 bills coming in, and these are for first reading. We have the supplementary financial papers. The President has made an announcement of putting aside $10 billion for the flood relief, and mm-hmm. there are other matters that Minister Ashney will include in the financial papers that are coming. So those are big issues of the government. And of course, after Patterson or the opposition matters are finished, then you come to my motion, which is a government motion, to do with the removal of Mr. Patterson as chair of the Public Accounts Committee. So that I expect tomorrow there'll be quite a lot of interest in what's going on in the debate that's held. The opposition says there'll be all sorts of fireworks or whatever. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Parliament is always unpredictable. One is never quite sure. It's something like cricket, no? Except I think cricket is much more, it's a much more disciplined game than Parliament is sometimes. Yeah, yeah. But so we have what we're putting in the House tomorrow, other than the motion I'm bringing on Patterson, issues that will come up in following sittings, and one of the big issue, of course, is the supplementary financial papers regarding the flooding. I mean, when you're seeing this is a different flood than 2005. 2005 affected, you know, a number of the coastal regions, but this is a flood that's affected all 10 regions, and it's a very strange combination of variables. You've had the rain, of course, and heavy rains, and you've had also the Amazon basin and rivers flooding and overflowing and backing up along the Brazilian border and into the rivers connecting with Guyana. And so the rivers are swollen, coming down from the highlands, and sometimes because we're on the coast we think, you know, we're living on flat land. But Guyana has highlands, it has mountains, and so that water is coming down, and so we've seen the damage it is doing in Upper Mazaruni. Jawala is badly affected. The Middle Mazaruni, we've just had a team come out of giving hampers and stuff like that. Mining communities, mining camps are damaged, as well as, of course, Barticus had flooding. Region 9 has been suffering for flooding now for quite a while because of the Rio Negro and Rio Blanco, both overflowing into the savannas, and anyway, the rain as well. And then you have Region 10 that's been badly affected, and the reports coming out tonight that Demerara River, the upper parts of Demerara River, are really in bad shape. And so This is a national disaster in a sense that has affected all 10 regions. And in some regions, the impact will be felt for quite a long time. And of course, Minister Zulfikar, most of us talked about the impact on agriculture. And so the supplementary you're bringing is probably for this phase.
Yeah.
But if this continues, I'm sure we will have to go back and get additional money. And of course, all of this is on top of COVID. All of this is on top of the COVID pandemic that we are facing in the midst of trying to vaccinate our people. And so it is quite a challenging time, but one I think that the government has been handling very well.
Okay.
And reaching out to people and assisting.
There is an allegation, and I think we want to deal with that, and this speaks to the length of time that it has taken for there to be a sitting since March 4. I know you've talked about that off camera, and I think I really want to hear you give us some pointers, some of the points you shared with me off camera for the benefit of those that are following us. So the question here is the longest period to the mind of course, your partners, the opposition, that would be in the House, that it's taking too long for the government to have another sitting?
Well, I always find it interesting how the opposition members have short memories, or that they don't think things out logically. For example, yes, there has been a period from when the budget ended, and I think everyone remembers the last day of the budget, the behavior of the opposition, and the Speaker suspending members of the opposition for their behavior. And then we've had, of course, the decision of the Speaker that they were having a number of cases in Parliament of staff that were affected. And we have to go back and remember, the very first day of Parliament, September the 1st, there were members of Parliament who came to Parliament and were COVID positive. And that led to, of course, who they got infected from, one doesn't know. But the clerk got infected, the deputy, the speaker got infected, members of staff got infected, other members of the House. And so I think in the last few weeks, the speaker has been extraordinarily worried about the numbers of staff who were positive, and therefore took a decision that, you know, the committees would not meet, and they would try to sanitize and fumigate, etc., but the committees wouldn't meet, and therefore if the committees are not meeting, we're not meeting in the House either. And so that has been contributing to a delay in a sitting being called. But nevertheless, to go back on that, I just want to remind the opposition members who sometimes don't do their own research and homework. But the 100th sitting was December the 21st, 2018, a very famous day. And a no-confidence motion was passed bringing down the government. After that, there were only 3 other sittings. So let's take the 100 mark. We had 5 years. So that's approximately 20 sittings per annum, at which, at each year, we dealt with a budget. A budget is minimally 12 sittings, minimally 12 sittings. So out of 20 sittings per year, 12 were only dealing with the budget. That left approximately 8 sittings for any other business of the House on an annual basis. And 8 times 5, so that's 40. We're at, so I'm just doing a maths lesson.
So you think there's a problem?
Just doing a maths lesson. But, you know, we're in the 28th sitting in a matter of 9 months. And therefore, yes, we would like to meet more often, and we shall be. When the supplementary financial papers are laid tomorrow, we are anticipating a sitting being held very shortly after that in accordance with the standing orders. We have a lot of business to bring before the House, and our policy has always been, particularly with bills, to try, and complex bills that we've had consultations on and stuff like that. Okay. So we're not rushing bills in like was done before. No one has seen them, no one knows them. Even some of their own members weren't familiar with what were in the bills, as we had, remember, a couple of cases where members spoke on a different bill than the one that was before the House.
Confusion in the camp, you want to say?
Beg your pardon?
Confusion in the camp?
Yes, this was a famous Mr. Jaipal Sharma who got the bills mixed up.
Oh boy.
So I shouldn't be calling his name, but anyway, he's not there anymore. But the issue is that we have a lot of business to bring in, and I hope programs like this we can meet before and talk about some of the issues. There are a number of the bills that are coming up on the order paper which have different approaches. For example, one of them, the Caribbean Court of Justice ruled on the cross-dressing case that was brought, that it was unconstitutional, was unlawful. And so we are bringing, one of the bills we're bringing is to repeal that section of the law that makes cross-dressing, prohibited, unlawful. And so that is just bringing us into compliance with the Caribbean Court of Justice ruling. And I think that's important for us to show that we are complying with the apex court of Guyana, even though the decision was made, I think, a year or more ago or more. We have bills that people may be interested in, the births registration of births and deaths. For example, there's a problem across the country of many people who have never had a birth certificate. Their birth was never registered, so how do they get a birth certificate? And so that amendment we're bringing in will make it easier for people who were never registered, and now they're in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and don't have a birth certificate, or someone who could be as young as 18, but doesn't have a birth certificate, their parents have died or emigrated or whatever. And so those kind of bills to make life a little easier for people. There's another one on the civil law to do with, just let me get the right title before I give you the wrong title, because the Civil Law of Guyana Amendment, for example, where persons, the bills that we're bringing, for example, with persons who may die interstate, and what happens afterwards. And so we're modernizing those and bringing those into. Many of these bills acts were written a long time ago, and so we're bringing them into the reality that we live in now, and so to make it easier for people. So a lot of those bills are simple bills. You have a whole set of them coming in to do with helping the police in terms of evidence and clarifying. Now that we have the forensic lab, you have to be able to amend laws to allow the analysts to go before the courts. There was no such thing before. So those things that kind of bring us up to date with what is, and trying to make sure that we reduce the impediments in the courts for the police to act and so on. And I think those are basic bills that are brought in. Of course, we have one pending, which is the adoption of the Children's Bill, which will not be done this sitting. And then you have the two others that are sitting for select committees, the famous one on marijuana and the other one on the hire purchase. Those are two that are waiting for the Parliament to declare, to have a committee of selection to meet, to appoint those select committees. So there are a number of things going on. There's some more bills coming which aren't ready yet for Parliament that are drafted. So I think that there's going to be legislation that covers all sectors. You're going to have legislation dealing with the social issues. You're going to have legislation that's dealing with law enforcement and improving the capacity of the law and order bodies. The other areas, of course, oil and gas, all those are going to be coming up, as well as other amendments to remove the impediments for people to have service and or to get things done in our society. And so that's what we're trying to do, is parallel what's going on with trying to get investments and expansion of the economy, is also to make sure the laws are modernized and able to cope with those new issues.
Correct. I know Minister Onisha Washington has been talking about the hire purchase bill.
Yes.
She has been talking about that, and the fact that the system that existed is so draconic, and it really stymie progress in so many ways for persons that are willing to do business or interested in doing business.
Yeah.
And how much it really robbed some of the poorer class of people of really benefiting from that particular system, as well as the matter you just raised with as it relates to debts. Minister of Legal Affairs spoke about that, and he talked about that a lot. And he said, you know, there are so many people who may have passed on, but the money is just locked into the banking institutions, and so it cannot come up because these documents have got. So we've got to push it.
Yeah, so there's simple.
So there's so many bills.
Some of them are rather simple amendments, but they make a tremendous difference in people's lives. So the whole issue of if you die intestate, what happens to what you have left behind, and of course there are issues to do with families, and sometimes this leads to family disputes, you know. So I think that there's a whole wad of bills like that that will be coming, that are looking at kind of unlocking some of the impediments to people doing business and being able to access a number of services, and there are going to be others that are going to be policy driven and more modern and stuff like that. So there are a number of issues that, for example, in health, Minister Frank looking at things like Mental Health Act. Our Mental Health Act is very old, and so going back, you know, I think 1930s or whatever. So these are some of this is not where you can amend that bill. You probably have to write a completely new one. And they're going to be those kind of bills that have to come up. And so I think that this is an interesting time. I mean, that as a society, as we're looking at diversifying and our economy, that what are the issues that make life, how can we make people's lives easier from a statutory point of view? And of course, the other areas, which are not in the agenda, the areas of electoral reform and so on, that will come up later.
There is also the matter that will come up, and this relates to the parliamentary secretaries. We talked about that, the removal of the parliamentary secretaries. I know you've got expectations on that one too.
Well, the Chief Justice has used as a kind of template what happened with Felix and Scott. And Felix and Scott were technocratic ministers who had been on the candidate list, and so the matter went to court, was brought by and the citizen. The Chief Justice in Chang ruled that they were there unlawfully. And the government went to the then Chancellor, who was Karl Singh, and asked for a stay of execution. That was given very quickly, and then the case was never heard until January 2020. So they were there collecting salaries and benefits and being ministers with all the accoutrements that go with that, and so that is a template that my understanding is the Chief Justice has used in her ruling. We have filed an appeal and we have filed a stay, and so that has not been heard yet. I think the appeal was filed, and maybe I think 2 weeks or more ago, the stay was filed over a week ago. So we hope that the same alacrity that was given in the Felix Scott case in terms of the stay will be extended in the case of these two young parliamentary secretaries, and then of course the actual appeal has to be heard. So it is unfortunate. There are two young people who are lovely potential members of parliament for the future and possibly ministers of the future, who knows, but it's unfortunate that this has gone to court, but we are prepared to argue the case in favor of our parliamentary secretaries. All over the world, parliamentary secretaries are appointed. You know, so this is not unusual.
On our last parliamentary agenda, you did speak of it, and as well, I know you're going to talk about it again. And this relates to the Public Accounts Committee, the Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. The government continues to push for its removal of the Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee.
Yes. Yes, I have a motion here. Removal of the chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee. The argument is about when we were having a discussion in the 2016 Auditor General's Report. This is where when we started back. So that's where we're at. 2016, we still have 2017, 2018, 2019 audit reports that are pending before the Public Accounts Committee. And there were a number of questions raised in regards to the Ministry of Public Infrastructure. And so on February the 1st, I raised a motion that Mr. Patterson should resign as the chair of the Public Accounts Committee. And failing to do that, I would then bring a motion to call for his removal. And at that point, when I spoke on February the 1st, it's in the minutes of the meeting, that I said that was not against the opposition chairing, and any other member of the opposition could chair, but not Mr. Patterson, as he was bringing, you know, the issue of integrity was a question. And so we went on from February 1st, and he used every subterfuge that he could think of to prevent the motion being put to the vote. Because, as you know, you make a motion, you table a motion, and then the chairperson has to put it to the vote. The government has more persons in the Public Accounts Committee than the opposition, as in all Public Accounts Committee. That has happened. And so he has resisted. The clerk has spoken to him. The clerk has been called into the committee several times to guide us, and each time he's just disobeyed, abandoned it. And then the Speaker wrote him. Now, when a Speaker writes a Member of Parliament, it is highly unusual, and therefore when a Speaker points out to you that you can't asterisk a member's motion, which is what he did to me. So after he didn't get through, you know, in March he didn't get through, then he decided to, in other words, try to prevent me from bringing the motion. So it has been torturous in the committee, and so the Speaker did realize that the committee is not meeting. After the last meeting we had, which was 5 hours of torture and abuse, I can tell you that, and for any persons who were looking at it, it was gross. But the Speaker wrote telling him basically that you can't asterisk a member's motion. You have to put the motion to and that the committee decide, and instructed him to do that, and told him that you're violating the standing orders. You're in breach of the standing orders, and that this is the height of bullyism. That was over a month ago. Mr. Patterson did not call a meeting of the committee, did not acknowledge the Speaker's letter, and so that is when the decision was taken to bring the motion that this is not a member who is prepared to uphold the standing orders of the House. And this is not a young, new MP who doesn't know the rules and is just being wild. This is a person who's been in Parliament from, what, 2001, somewhere in there. So he's been in Parliament for a while. He knows the rules. And that to just disregard what the Speaker says and to, as I said, not acknowledge, not take any action in regards to it, and just kind of thumb his nose at the Speaker. He also did it to the clerk. The clerk is the custodian of the procedures of the House. The clerk over and over and over came to the committee and advised us what had to be done. This was totally disobeyed. Mr. Patterson, then some of the members have said that well, you know, they're doing this because they don't want, they're saying, one, we don't want the opposition to chair. First of all, we have made it very clear from the first time the motion was raised and every time afterwards that this is not saying the opposition mustn't chair. This is saying that Patterson mustn't chair. That we're not accepting Patterson, and that the opposition is free to put forward another chair. They have refused that. The second thing is, were they to hold out, let's go to the worst extreme. The motion is passed in Parliament on tomorrow to do with the removal of the, and the opposition decides, well, they're going to put him back in the committee as the chair. Well, they can't do that because a resolution of the House remains a resolution of the House and has to be obeyed, and can only be changed by another motion to amend it by a majority of the votes, which they don't have. And so if they're going to go to that point to be so disruptive, then really what kind of opposition members of Parliament are we looking at? Because there are other members of the opposition, I'm sure, who would be willing to chair the Public Accounts Committee. I don't think this is a position that is an entitlement for one person, you know. And so if he doesn't wish to obey, or the members don't want to name anybody, then the standing order allows that any member can be appointed to be the chairman for a day. So you can have different chairpersons be a day, and it doesn't have to be an opposition member, because they're only holding for a day.
Okay.
For that committee meeting.
Yeah, but as you said before, the prerogative there is the opposition. You're just saying that it's not Patterson. Patterson's the person.
Yes, Patterson's the problem. Patterson's the problem. We've never said that we are not going to overturn what is the practice and that the opposition chairs the Public Accounts Committee. What we're saying, not him. And that furthermore, the opposition, and the leading opposition, I think, is aware of what's going on. I'm not aware that he has spoken to the Speaker, nor has he doesn't seem to have done anything in relation to Mr. Patterson's behavior in the Public Accounts Committee either. But the leading opposition has to lead the way, you know, and therefore he has to be able to say, look, this seat hasn't got Patterson's name on it, that any of his MPs could be Patterson, and he could call for a meeting of the Committee of Selection and say, look, I want to change all our people on the PAC, that is opposition, or I want to replace one and put in somebody else, so that, and this is who he wants. This is the leading opposition who names the chairpersons, unless one is saying the leading opposition is holding on to Patterson for dear life. I'd be rather surprised that Mr. Harman would do that. The other thing they're trying to come along with, which is all smoke and mirrors, this is all what it is. The other issue is that, oh, we don't want to discuss the Auditor General's reports. But that's utter nonsense, because we're at 2016. we haven't even got through half of 2016 Auditor General's report. And we're uncovering page by page. From the time we started in this Public Accounts Committee, page by page, paragraph by paragraph, you're finding irregularities, unaccounted money, unaccounted spending, procurement of items without going through the tender process, page by page. So 2016 is going to take us a while. And then we still have 2017, we have 2018, 2019. And who was government in that? Was it us? Why would it not be our interest? If that's the line they're saying, that we don't want to discuss, discuss these Auditor General, why would we not? It's not when we were in government. In fact, we have the interest, and they don't have, I believe, the interest to have the Public Accounts Committee look at those years, you know, because it wouldn't be in their interest to do that. So I think they're trying what you call reverse psychology. You know, things that are bothering them, they're then saying it's you who are doing it, but it's really, this is what they're concerned about.
So the government's contention is that there should be a meeting of the minds, a meeting of clear understanding, that it's got to be a conversation between both parties, and respecting all the rules that the Parliament definitely is guided by.
The standing order is what guide us in Parliament and keep some level of order in Parliament, and this Parliament is proving to be one in which very little regard for the standing orders. I mean, in Parliament when we were in opposition, we weren't the greatest guys, but when Scotland, you know, said no, you would protest and say, mumble, 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 as I did many times, and would put up my hand to speak, and he wouldn't let me speak. And, you know, you kind of know your place in a sense. You find ways to use the standing orders to get the issues out. But when the Speaker says no, you have to stop. And you saw what happened during the budget debate. Total chaos. The Speaker's standing up, no one's listening. I mean, in all my years of Parliament, I have rarely seen that. I think I remember once when Mr. Trotman was the Speaker, and the opposition, which wasn't us, we were government, didn't want Minister Rohi to speak. And they banged and banged and banged and banged. It went on, and every time Trotman got up to speak, they continued until Trotman adjourned the sitting, because he couldn't control his own, because he was representing the opposition as the Speaker. He was named by the opposition. So, but generally that in Parliament one is expected to have some level of decorum and to use your brains as best as you can, instead of, you know, your bullyism or physicality. You're not expected to be physical in Parliament. You're expected, you know, to use your brain and your speaking powers in certain ways. So I think that a lot of what they're saying is just trying to smoke and mirrors.
Okay.
You know.
All right, so we were talking here about the supplementary financial papers, which
Yes.
is important. You're talking here about, and this relates directly to what we are experiencing right now, the flooding, the monies for $10 billion. This is critical, especially as it relates to what's happening.
Yeah.
We started the program by talking about that. You've done some travels as well. You've seen some of the pains or some more people are going through. Can we speak to some of that?
Well, I did in the beginning in terms of the flood, and I can't speak of all the regions. I'm the geographic MP for Region 7, but I have seen, and I'm very proud of my President, Prime Minister, and colleague ministers who have been in the field up to today. Prime Minister and ministers have been in Region 10. You have also, the President has also been out again, as he is every single day, to see what's going on. So unlike when we had the flood in the Pacaraimas in 2018 or 2017, I think it was, and no one went from the government. Nobody went in, and 60 houses were actually washed away because they had flash floods. So this is one region, not a large population. No minister went. They sent in an NGO to distribute Pampers. When we raised it in Parliament, are you going to help these people get back on their feet, repair the schools, help them? There was a negative response. So I keep remembering that in contrast to what we've seen both in 2005 when we had the flood, and in that time I was in charge of Region 3 in terms of the flood relief, and it was terrible, really, really terrible. And in fact, in the 2005 flood, we were feeding half the population every day for a month. That's an achievement for a country like us. Today we are feeding, according to the records, I think there's about 14,000, maybe more, because in some areas the water is rising, in other areas going down a little bit, but most of the areas the water is going up. Because this is land water coupled with rain. And then you have, for example, in Bartica, when you have the high tide and the rain, then you have flood. So that the efforts to bring relief to people, and we have to look at the long term. It's not just the first phase, obviously, is safety of people. So people have had to be evacuated, because in some areas in the interior, if that water starts to come down in the middle of the night and you haven't moved, you're going to be swept away. Yeah. And so the safety of our people, food, that they have food to eat, and that they're safe.
Health issues as well.
But the next phase is now beginning in terms of the health people now going in to look at trying to prevent gastroenteritis, the issue of malaria, for example, other things like, as the water, gastroenteritis, but also in terms of skin infections, because the water is stagnant in some places, and so children particularly would be susceptible to those kind of things. So you have a health teams now going out into all the areas, and whilst you still have a health team that's dealing with vaccination for COVID. And then, of course, the biggest hurdle, the hugest hurdle, is going to be agriculture, because whether you're dealing with the coast, whether you're dealing with the interior, farms have been damaged everywhere and flooded, and crops have been lost, whether it's a small farmer, whether it is big farms with rice and sugar and stuff. And then you have the horrible scenes, which I've seen, of animals that have died.
Trapped,
You know, I mean, it's just horrendous. And so this phase, which we're now entering into, as some areas the water goes on, other areas have not reached that level yet. So there's unevenness. But as you go towards the water going down, will be all the cleanup and the reconstruction and agriculture, farms and so on, and people being helped to get back on their feet, particularly small farmers who are dependent on the crops they grow, and even in the interior, the cassava, and so they grow to eat. That's their meals, and so that's going to be a longer term. That's not a 2-week issue. That's going to be quite a while, and so I think we have to see this flood in terms of the longer term impact. In 2005, the flood was massive. It did impact on a huge number of people, but it wasn't across all 10 regions. And so there was some level of what you call control in terms of the impact.
Okay.
Although it impacted on, what was it, 60+% of the economy was damaged by the flood,
Most certainly. Okay, so we're getting ready to go back to Parliament tomorrow, sitting tomorrow.
Yes.
Have you had your jab?
Yes. Yes, I had it.
You had both?
Yes, I'm fully vaccinated.
Fully vaccinated.
I'm very proud of it.
So
and I'm not sick. I had it done yesterday, and I'm fine. I was kind of nervous because some people say, oh, you know, when you have the second one, and I'm fine. And nothing happened.
Even while we talk about that, Minister, there's still the notion, there's still the case of some communities where people, and in some communities more than others, where you've got large portions of those communities, people not being vaccinated. You know, you use every opportunity you have
it's scary.
To ask people to really come full circle, understand the challenges, and get vaccinated, because we really want to make sure that we are safe. We've lost 400, and that's too large a number already.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm kind of amazed by the level of misinformation that's out there. And I think part of it in this instance, the social media has contributed to this by the number of things that have been spread on the social media that have no evidence. And I keep saying to people, look, Guyana has always had a high vaccination rate, immunization rate for our children. We're very proud of it. And what does that mean that all of us as parents, as soon as a baby is born and we do the BCG, then we do all the other vaccines, and we know when we take a child to a clinic, and some vaccines give them more fever, some make them irritable and crotchety, and we know that. But the majority of us as mothers and parents make sure our children are vaccinated. And why do we do that? Because it will immunize them against diseases. This is no different, except that the population being immunized are not babies and under 5-year-olds who don't have a choice because we take them as parents. This is where adults have a choice and who don't want to do it. And yet they see that the reason why the children don't die in Guyana of certain diseases is because they're vaccinated. This vaccine, it doesn't say that you can't get COVID, but what it does say that you won't get COVID and die. That it protects you from the most serious critical repercussions of COVID and the illnesses that come with it. And so that's one issue of protecting your own life. The other thing is being responsible for other people in your society, in your home, your grandparents, your aunties, your uncles and relatives and so on. We have to have a civic responsibility. So although we haven't mandated and said to people, this is mandatory, you must have it, at the same time, we have appealed to people's civic mindedness, that this is a civic responsibility. And so we want to get back to normalcy. The society is straining psychologically, financially and everything else on top of the flood. You know, when you see now things in New York, I think Canada today, someone was telling me, opened restaurants for the first time to dine in after 256 days. It's this is like, you know, magic, because these were things we took for granted, that, you know, you can go out and socialize and meet with your friends. And some of us are trying, some people are trying very hard. And then there are other parts of the country where it's like, who cares? You know, in certain parts of the country, including Georgetown, some places, you know, the people think they can sport up and drink and have no mask on. And the problem is that 400 odd is still a lot. But if we all get vaccinated, we could make a major reduction. If we don't, then the death rate will continue. People will continue to get infected and get ill. And so how long can we all do this? And to me, the greatest victims of all this are children.
Mm-hmm.
When our children are out of school, you know, from March to now, it's not just about education. It's not only, it's not about education too, especially the small children. It's about social skills and learning to be in a different environment than home and under their mother, and it's all about the skills, life skills, that help them to grow and be productive and balanced individuals. So I'm not so worried about the teenagers. I'm more concerned about the little ones who are like 5, 6, 7. The smaller ones will catch up, who are not in school yet, but the ones who are like 7, 8. And so we have to be concerned about them. We can't just be concerned about ourselves, that people say, oh, I can go drink and nothing will happen to me. I've got great immune system. This is a level of selfishness that can't be acceptable in our society. And so we're not telling people you have to be, but at the same time, there are parts of the world where they say, you can't come here unless you have your card.
Yeah.
You can't do this unless you have your card. And I do know some people in Guyana who are saying, you can't come to my house unless you tell me you're vaccinated. Now, and people are saying, this is my house, this is my domain.
Yeah.
And I can say, I love you, you're my friend, but until you're vaccinated, you can't come into my house.
Yeah, this is my space.
This is my space. And I think I'm hearing that coming from a number of quarters where people are saying, you know, we can't mandate this, we can't tell people you got to do this, but in my own domain, I can set my rules.
That's right.
You know, and so I encourage everybody out there, please get your vaccines. Those of you who've had none, please, we want to see you alive and strong and helping us to produce and make an even better Guyana than what we have.
In your last few words, Minister, we're getting ready to wrap up. Tomorrow, June 10, will be a very important sitting. You did say to us that there's so many issues that will come up, but it's going to be an interesting day, you did say to us. Well, so you're prepared us for tomorrow, which is going to be interesting.
I hope it's not like March the 4th, the last day of the budget, but one never knows. But we would hope that in Parliament we can get our business done according to what is required. But I don't want to predict, but I hope the opposition gets their level and understands that there's a role for the opposition, there's a role for government, and that until, I think part of their problem is they refuse to see the government as a legitimate government.
Okay.
And until that they accept that the PPPC won the elections, and they didn't, then that's going to tarnish the whole behavior in Parliament, the whole behavior outside of Parliament as well. And so I think that's the crux of the matter.
And finally, too, based on what you've said to us, many of the bills that will be coming, it pretty much speaks to a hectic agenda for the people of the nation and to enhancing their livelihoods.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Minister of Governance, of course, we thank you so much for being here with us on Parliamentary Agenda. And of course, until our next program, we thank you. We hope you stay well, stay safe, vaccinated already, which means that you are a soldier ready for battle.
Yes, thank you.
We're going to meet again.
Okay, thank you very much for having me.
This has been Parliamentary Agenda. I'm Mark Watson. Until our next program, do take care and good night.